Yo, it's your boy Jalen back at again for another voice recording. In this voice recording, we're going to talk about mythlessness. This is going to be more so inspired by the book that I'm reading currently, The Cry for Myth, or A Cry for Myth, by Rollo May. This is the book that I had snatched from the Goodwill, but I snatched another book. But anyways, Rollo May, A Cry for Myth. So, with mythlessness, what we're talking about here is exactly like how it sounds. The lack of a myth within, the lack of a myth within American society. Like, there really isn't one. And I talked about the white picket fence myth being destroyed and sort of having to reconceptualize that. But, of course, this reconceptualization is mine. It's not a macro conceptualization that everybody shares. It's merely sort of theoretical in its existence. But, shit. It's only theoretical in its existence, in a sense. So, there's that. But, despite all that, America does need a myth to keep pushing along. Rollo May talks about a lot of times, within American culture, modernity has produced, well, Rollo May doesn't talk about this, but other thinkers talk about it. Rollo May more so talks about a symptom, narcissism, being a byproduct of this. Modernity has made it to where man is the center of, the universe. And being the center of the universe, man has a particular self-confidence that makes him do everything without an other. Right, so with pre-modernity, there was, nature and God and all this sort of stuff, polytheism. In post-modernity, we have, a lot of things, we have problems, essentially. Post-modernity is concerned with problems, I guess you could say. When you really think about it, ecological crisis, unemployment, war, AI, all sorts of shit. So, modernity has made it to where we've just been so preoccupied with ourselves and we don't really look for anything higher. And, this has led to a narcissism where we merely just consume things and we care about our own short-lived fulfillment of our desires, right? We're very concerned with short-term gratification. We're not concerned with long-term gratification that can only be gained through discomfort. But not only this, but with a mythology gives you meaning. And another thing within our society is the fact that, there's not really any meaning. I mean, you go to work, you get money, you buy things, but it doesn't mean anything, right? Even with the meanings that you do get a lot of times, for instance, let's think. For instance, buying it for someone, that's a short-term idea. There's not really any long-term ideas. I'm at my job a lot of times, and people don't even really think about trying to challenge the chain of command if they have problems with the work that they have. It's always a short-term immediacy. They can't really think of anything bigger in the scheme of things. And, when it comes to work, with working, people can't really think of anything with work besides getting a job to make more money versus, I want to get a job that allows me to fulfill this existential desire, this existential desire, this existential desire. Or I want to get a job because I feel some higher divinity calling me to get this job. You don't really have any higher existentially, religiously, spiritually fulfilling impetuses to get things. All it is for fulfillment. It's for money, which is used for fulfillment. It's for getting things. And this is sort of made it to where you don't really see any joy in anything. Of course, Rolome talks about depression going up 10 times since the start of the modern era. From the 1920s to now. If it went up 10 times then, imagine how much depression has increased to now. Now, why has depression increased? Because a meaningless universe was unfathomable in pre-modernity. Like, there's no way, because you have gods, you have philosophy, there has to be a mechanism behind the doings of the universe. There's no way that it can be meaningless. Or at least in a sense, there's no way that it can be empty as it's seen now. But that's what it's seen as now. It's seen as empty. It's seen as an empty pursuit. And we really do need myths. And I was thinking about, this is just a side note, I was thinking about my whole, schizoid fantasy life. And I was thinking about maybe my schizoid fantasy life is, the communication of myths to myself. What if I'm communicating myths to myself within my fantasy life? What if it's not completely fantasy, but I'm communicating important messages to myself through myths? I'm not really able to do it concretely. I'm not really able to do it super abstractly, so I do it in this mythological way. And that's what I really like about myth, is that it creatively expresses important themes and important moralities for people through non-constrictive means, through the use of gods, magic, fantasy, folklore, all sorts of stuff. And I like that, and you can also, connect with gods as well. At least for me, with the old gods, you can connect with them a lot more because they have an imperfection to them. I mean, with the Norse mythology, they're not even really eternal. They're going to die at Ragnarok. And of course, the Greek gods are sinful, in certain areas. So you can connect with them and understand them. And that gives a power, that produces a power that the gods have that is placed on a society. Of course, we're going back to Ebola and how, gods and all this divinity can serve a society, but you need a mythology within the society to do that. You need a framework as to how do the powers in our society function. You have to have a framework like that. You have to have an idea of how that plays out. If you don't have an idea of how that plays out, you're going to be walking around aimlessly like we're doing now. We don't really know what America is because America doesn't have anything sustaining it besides an economy that is eternal, right? Myths are eternal, if not in a concrete sense, in a sense of what fuels them. That's why a lot of times when you look at mythology, that's why comparative mythology is a thing, because a lot of these same drives make it to where the same archetypes and the same themes pop up in cultures that quote unquote have never seen each other. And I use quotes there because we know about history. But it's important. Mythology, all this sort of shit, man, it's important and you have to consider it. You have to think about it. with how we're running our culture. We really need a sense of mythology, a sense of a higher calling to function in everyday life. Just functioning in everyday life to make money and to buy things isn't enough. You need something that can have a sense of immortality to it. You need an immortality to the things that you're doing. You need a tragedy to the things that you're doing. You need a higher aspiration to the things that you're doing. Just doing things just to do them is not going to cut it. You need a myth and an existential purpose to your life. And congruently, America also needs that for its sociological future. But anyways, this is Jalen signing out. Peace.